Why do we like munching on ice cubes? How come we get metabolism so wrong? What's the connection between Pez and tobacco? Well, prepare to start slapping your forehead and saying, "Don't!" I'm Mike with List25, and here at Facts About Life you won't believe you didn't already know. Did you know that you can actually tell what color eggs a chicken will lay just by looking at its earlobes? I know, it sounds crazy, right? But it's a real thing. Chickens with white earlobes usually lay white or light-colored eggs, while those with red earlobes are usually behind the brown eggs in the carton. Of course, nature loves to throw a few curveballs, so there's always a few exceptions to the rule. And just to keep us on our toes, different times of the day can result in slightly different shades of egg from the same chicken. Space launches just aren't the same without a voice counting down from 10. This voice always seems to be American, doesn't it? But just how American is the iconic NASA countdown? Well, I've got news for you. It's actually German, and it comes from a sci-fi movie. Fritz Lang's Woman in the Moon was a silent picture made in 1929. It included a rocket countdown, and this simple visual idea stuck in people's imaginations. You wouldn't want to find yourself in an American chicken's shoes, so to speak. After enduring terrible living conditions, slaughtered chickens are dunked in chlorine baths to kill microbes, but these often fail. Salmonella and Listeria can survive because the chlorine levels, capped at 55 ppm, fall far short of the 100 to 150 ppm needed. To make things worse, chickens in the US are fed arsenic-based drugs, which turn into carcinogenic arsenic in their bodies. Add to that routine doses of antibiotics, which only adds to the antibiotic resistance issue, and it's no wonder the EU banned it. You may have noticed the small loop at the back of button-down shirts. What's the purpose behind this? Well, the origin goes back to a single clothing brand, Gant. Back in the 1960s, the company was designing shirts specifically for students, especially in Ivy League schools. To keep these shirts from getting wrinkled during a sports session, Gant added these locker loops so that the shirts could be hung up in the locker rooms. Soon, the loops took on a life of their own. They became associated with the upper class, wealth, and power. And apparently, if a man was in a relationship, they were supposed to remove the loop. Now, before this video, I actually looked through my closet, and none of mine have it. So, I guess I'm just not fancy enough for the loop. So, sorry. I'm not Ivy League material. Have you ever wondered why crackers have those tiny little holes? I mean, it's not just for decoration. They actually serve a purpose. Those tiny punctures are known as docking holes, and they're key when it comes to getting that perfect crunch. When the dough bakes, these holes keep the top and bottom layers connected, stopping big air pockets from forming that would otherwise turn your cracker into a puffed up pastry. So, the more holes there are, the denser and crunchier the cracker gets. Cows of the British royal family have a luxurious time when it comes to sleeping arrangements. No laying down in the fields for these gals. The BBC revealed how blue-blooded bovines recline in style on a comfy waterbed. Oh, and the bed is set to vibrate when the king wants a milkshake. Okay, I kind of made that part up. Food allergies are no joke. 32 million Americans have them, and someone ends up in the ER every 3 minutes because of it. In 2018, a 14-year-old in Butler Township, UK, ended up in the hospital not by accident, but by design. Another student deliberately smeared pineapple on her hand and high-fived the victim, knowing full well she was allergic. 3 students were ultimately charged, including the one who carried out the act, for assault and conspiracy. The most popular keyboard layout is QWERTY. But why isn't it arranged in some other way, like alphabetically? Well, for that we have to go back over 160 years to Milwaukee in the 1860s. An inventor named Christopher Latham Scholes was one of 4 people to patent the first typewriter. The first incarnation actually was in alphabetic order. However, early users of this system found that it wasn't efficient for telegraph operators who were typing and translating Morse code. Scholes made a deal with the arms manufacturer Remington to produce the first QWERTY system in 1878. It has been consistently challenged over the years. In 1930 from the Dvorak system, and more recently from the Calc system. So far, though, none of them have caught on. Imagine a world where your bed is so important that it becomes a treasured item in your will. Back in medieval times, the size and splendor of your bed were a clear status symbol. It was common for the most lavish beds to be crafted from English oak or walnut and draped in silks or other luxurious fabrics, such that even after death, they would continue to symbolize wealth and prestige. So your social position was basically determined by the size of your bed. Mine's a queen. For now, I eventually am going to look at getting a king. If you're laying in the dark and you close your eyes, ready to sleep, all you see is pitch black, right? Wrong. In fact, the color you see is Eigengrau, German for intrinsic gray. So you're not plunged into darkness, you are in fact ushering in the gray. Dating back to the 19th century, the gray effect is created by signals from the rod photoreceptors in our eyes. Arby's isn't exactly known for gourmet meals, but one customer in Tip City, Ohio got way more than he ordered. While eating his chicken sandwich, David Scheiding found a slice of human skin, complete with fingerprints mixed in. Naturally, he felt sick and bolted to the bathroom. Health inspectors later discovered the manager had cut his thumb while shredding lettuce. Instead of tossing out the lettuce, he simply cleaned up and carried on. Scheiding sued Arby's owners for over $50,000, but the outcome of the case remains unknown. This hole is there to pick up a nail or a screw. That's why it's called a nail grab or a hook slot. It allows you to hammer in a nail somewhere and then hook the measuring tape onto it so that it doesn't become a two-man job. Did you know that in the early days of American football, the game was played with inflated pig bladders? Yep, hence the name pigskin that's still thrown around today. These round bladder-filled footballs were great for kicking and running, but not so much for throwing. But hey, they made do. So the next time you hear the word pigskin in reference to football, remember how pigs played a binding role in the evolution of the game. Sometimes after enjoying a cold drink, people chomp down on the remaining ice cubes. Or sometimes they just skip the drink and go straight to the ice. Pagophagia is the name given to this chilly crunching craving. You may even go so far as to munching frost from your freezer. One potential cause behind pagophagia is iron deficiency. Should you find yourself enjoying ice a little more than you should, then it might be worth visiting your doctor. Retired soldier Clark Bartholomew was enjoying a triple stacker at a Burger King in Honolulu when he felt something odd slide down his throat. Thinking it was nothing, he kept eating. Until something pierced his tongue. It turned out to be a needle. Even worse, he'd already swallowed another one, which lodged in his small intestine. Bartholomew sued the fast food giant and eventually reached an out-of-court agreement. Bottles with long necks have been around for over a century. They were created to maximize space. The design is cost-efficient because it means manufacturers can seal it with a small bottle cap rather than a big one, like you would find on jars. That's not the only reason for the long neck, though. The shape makes it easier to control when pouring, and is stable to handle. Bisphenol A, or BPA, wasn't always the villain of the plastic world. Back in the 1930s, scientists discovered that BPA's chemical structure closely resembled estrogen, the hormone involved in menopause. And yeah, my nickname for a while. So it became a treatment option for menopausal women. As we all know, BPA's popularity eventually took a drastic turn. It became a key ingredient in plastics, turning up in everything from water bottles to food containers, and was soon linked to the development of cancers. Today, over 90% of us have BPA in our bodies, and new research is being funded to study the effects of BPA and certain health problems. Yes, I was called estrogen even in elementary school. Fine, story time. You can leave this in if you want. In second grade, Miss Murray's class, Gorey Elementary, Tampa, Florida, I was called estrogen. And I'm like, they're like, oh, estrogen, huh? And I'm like, I'm going to prove you guys wrong. I'm going to go. So I went home, I looked up estrogen in the dictionary, and I found it, and it said estrin, a derivative of estrogen. I came back the next day, and they're like, did you find that? I went, nope. So I lied. I mean, there's a reason the medicine's called Estrin D. History teaches us many things, from the good to the bad to the downright ugly. On the latter front, the Holocaust forms a key part of training in the U.S. intelligence services. The FBI, for example, sends their latest recruits to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum to remind them of what can happen when the worst kind of people take charge of a country. If you've ever wondered how many maggots are too many in your mushrooms, well, the FDA has an answer. According to their guidelines, they'll only step in if there are 20 or more per 100 grams of mushrooms, or 5 maggots at least 2 millimeters long. Anything less? Totally fine. The FDA's Food Defect Levels Handbook also permits fly eggs in tomato paste, mold in fruit juices, and just about anything else they classify as foreign matter, including cigarette butts. If you look closely, there's a little arrow beside the fuel symbol on almost every car. You might have never noticed it before, but it can save you a lot of time, especially if you've just rented a car. This arrow tells you which side of the car the gas tank can be accessed from. The arrow has been a feature of most cars that were built from 2010 onwards. If the car is older than that, then you'll probably find that the gas tank is on the same side as the pump icon is on the dashboard. Here's a fascinating tidbit for you. Before nylon bristles took over, toothbrushes were made with animal hairs, specifically boar hair. It wasn't until 1938 that things took a turn for the modern when DuPont de Nemours introduced the first toothbrush with nylon bristles, famously called Dr. West's Miracle Toothbrush. His invention marked a huge leap forward in oral hygiene, and by the time World War II came around, everyone was brushing like a pro. What color is your toothbrush? I'll give you a second to go find out if you don't already know. Great, welcome back. If it's blue, then congratulations. You have selected America's most popular toothbrush color. The theory behind this is simple. Blue represents hygiene better than the others. It seems fresher, and with reportedly hundreds of millions of bacteria in your mouth, that sense of comfort is important. Remember that Simpsons episode where Bart becomes an exchange student in France and stays with people who spike their wine with antifreeze? Yeah, it wasn't that far-fetched. Propylene glycol, the active ingredient in antifreeze, can also be found in products like cake mixes, frosting, certain ice creams, and even flavored iced teas. While ingesting small amounts is considered safe, it made headlines in 2014 when Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey was pulled from Scandinavian shelves for exceeding EU limits. The CDC says it's unlikely to reach toxic levels through food, but in large doses, it can cause skin irritation, cardiovascular, and even neurotoxic problems. On many elevator doors, there is a little round hole, and if it weren't for that hole, a whole lot of essential work would be much more complicated to do. You see, that hole is actually a keyhole, allowing workers to open up the doors whenever they need. That can range from routine inspections to an emergency situation. If you find yourself in an elevator that's stuck in between floors, you'll be thanking the Lord for that tiny hole. That's right, the great apes handle birth control just fine since they're our closest relatives. However, it's not smooth sailing for every species. While birth control is a hit with gorillas, some big cats and canines can have a rough time with hormonal implants and have been found to have a tendency to develop uterine infections and even tumors. It's a perfect example of how interconnected and occasionally complicated our biological world can be. Seahorses are strange little creatures. You may already know that they can blend into their surroundings and that their eyes move independently from each other, which must be pretty freaky. However, did you know it's the male seahorse that gets pregnant? They also have kangaroo vibes with a tail pouch where the embryos can be incubated. Did you know that 2/3 of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa? The Ivory Coast alone produces nearly half of it, and according to a 2015 report, it's here where you will find almost 2 million children working all across the region. In many cases, the children's families can't afford school fees, so the kids end up working on farms instead. Others are trafficked from countries like Burkina Faso and Mali, tricked with promises of money or gifts. Once they arrive, these kids, some as young as 10, work for about 85 cents per day, if they're even paid. A lot of them are never allowed to go home and live under the constant threat of violence. Well, while we're on the subject of holes, if you thought that commercial airplanes were airtight, well, think again. Next time you have a window seat, take a close look at the bottom of the window. There's a tiny hole placed there for a very specific reason. As an airplane gains altitude, it needs to be pressurized so that people on board can breathe properly. The cabin is pressurized by blowing hot air from the engine, but pressure needs to be maintained, and that's where the small hole in the window comes in. Most of the excess hot air is let out of the outflow valve at the back of the plane. Another way the plane does this is through the bleed holes in the windows. No need to worry though, this is an extremely controlled and automatic process. Most of us have fond childhood memories associated with piggy banks, but have you ever wondered where they came from? Piggy banks have been around since the 14th and 15th centuries and were used in both Western Europe and Java in Southeast Asia. However, the concept of money boxes goes back even further, all the way back to the 2nd century BCE. The original piggy banks were simply clay jars. The clay was an inexpensive orange-colored material known as pig. Over time, the word pig evolved into pig, and eventually a clever potter decided to shape these jars into actual pig shapes. And that's how we ended up with the delightful piggy banks we still use today. Although, I never want to break one. I feel terrible. I like the ones that you can just open and get everything out. The modern bulletproof vest happened thanks to a surprisingly dangerous pizza delivery. Inventor Richard C. Davis was shot whilst delivering food from one of his restaurants in 1969. This guy was packing his own heat, so he managed to engage his attackers in a shootout. As he recovered, Davis thought of an idea that would eventually become soft concealable body armor for law enforcement. Bonus fact, the original bulletproof vest was invented by a Polish priest, Casimir Zeglen, in the 19th century. Amen to that. I said technically. The oil in peanuts can be used to make glycerol, which is then processed into nitroglycerin, a key ingredient in dynamite. So in theory, you could extract peanut oil, produce glycerol, and boom, you've got the makings of a powerful explosive. It is obviously far too complicated and ineffective to actually make dynamite from peanuts, and modern methods rely on much easier sources for glycerol. Still, if you're ever in a pinch and have to channel your inner MacGyver, peanuts might just save the day. There's a tiny dot next to the iPhone camera on the back of the phone. It's easy to miss, but you might have wondered why it's there. Apple only puts essential things on their products, and this dot is no different. It's a tiny microphone, one of 3 on the iPhone. The other 2 are placed at the top of the front face and near the speakers at the bottom. Together, they make sure that your voice is picked up, even if you're holding the phone upside down for some reason. The world changed for the better in 1902 thanks to an ingenious engineer named Willis Haviland Carrier. Carrier was working at a printing press in Brooklyn, New York, where high humidity was wreaking havoc on print quality. To tackle this, he devised a system that sent air through coils filled with cold water, cooling the air and removing moisture at the same time. His clever solution was the birth of modern air conditioning. By 1933, Carrier's invention had evolved into a complete air conditioning system that included a belt-driven condensing unit and mechanical controls, and became the gold standard in cooling systems in the world. While carrying out his duties as creator and leader of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong may have seemed a little tense. He had a lot on his plate, for sure. Yet this caused him more trouble because what was on the dictator's plate went to his bowels and stayed there. His unfortunate underlings reportedly had to extract hardened stools directly from the source. And if that didn't work, bring on the enema. Now that you know this extraordinary fact, you'll probably want to forget it. Sorry. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, and kohlrabi all come from the same plant. Yep, they all started out as wild mustard. About 2,500 years ago, the ancient Romans and Greeks started planting wild mustard seeds with larger leaves, which eventually gave us kale and collard greens. By the 1600s, selective breeding led to cabbage from bigger leaf buds, kohlrabi from thicker stems, Brussels sprouts from smaller heads, and broccoli and cauliflower from larger flowers. This one goes back a couple hundred years, so don't feel bad if you haven't guessed the real purpose. That tiny pocket in your jeans, right here, can be handy to put coins and other small objects in. I actually tend to throw my earbuds inside mine, but it turns out that it's originally intended for pocket watches. Levi Strauss & Co. designed the waist overalls back in 1873. These formed the basis of what turned into casual jeans. In those days, it was much more common for a man to carry a pocket watch that would often attach to clothing with a chain. Wristwatches started becoming popular among men during World War I, but out of tradition, the little pocket has remained, this one, to this day. And if you thought that pocket isn't well known, well, wait till we get to number 12, where we take a look at the tiny pocket hidden inside women's underwear. Wait till we look into women's underwear. I don't like that. Back in 1949, Joe Woodland wasn't just drawing doodles in the sand on Miami Beach, he was sketching out the very first barcode. Inspired by Morse code, he came up with a design of concentric circles made of thick and thin lines meant to be read from any angle. He got a patent for his idea in 1952, but technology took almost 20 years to catch up. With the rise of lasers and smaller computers, Woodland's vision finally became reality in the 60s. By 1972, Kroger was experimenting with barcode scanners using Woodland's original bullseye design. However, this was soon replaced by a more practical rectangular barcode, thanks to IBM's George Laurer. Despite some initial fears, people worried that barcodes were the mark of the beast or just a sneaky way for stores to rip them off, barcodes eventually became a staple of shopping by the 80s and transformed shopping forever. And now we have QR codes. As well, that they still use barcodes on food and stuff. Don't underestimate the humble rabbit. It may look like it's harmlessly chomping away on a carrot with its back to you while you go about your business, but the truth is, this animal has you very much in its sights. A rabbit can see behind itself without moving its head. How does it do that? Because of its crazy bug eyes on either side of its head. These can move the full 360 degrees. That spicy crab roll you love? It's not crab. It's starchy processed whitefish. And that tuna sashimi? It's a good chance that's not tuna either. In fact, 94% of the time, white tuna isn't tuna at all. It's escolar, a cheap bottom feeder nicknamed the X-lax fish for its unfortunate digestive effects. Escolar is actually so problematic that it's been banned in countries like Japan. Fraudulent fish is everywhere. One study found that 39% of surveyed NYC restaurants, including every sushi spot the team visited, served mislabeled fish. Oh, and that wasabi next to your sushi? It's probably fake too. Most restaurants use a green-tinted horseradish paste instead of the real thing. Grocery carts, or buggies, are pretty universal all over the world, usually made of metal or plastic. But why do they all feature the same design? Loops. They're usually on the back, right in front of the handlebar, and sometimes on the edges of the cart too. Well, the answer is almost too obvious. These loops are there to hang your shopping bags from. Remember that the next time you're running out of space inside your cart. If you could convert a gallon of gasoline into food, it would equal about 31,000 calories. That's the equivalent to around 120 Big Macs or 103 slices of pepperoni pizza. Of course, I do not recommend swapping your Big Mac for fuel, but it's a wild reminder of just how energy dense gasoline is. Tetraphobia is a deep-rooted fear of the number 4. Visit China, for example, and you might not see a lot of 4s in the phone books or on the front of houses. You see, the words death and 4 are virtually the same in Chinese. They're pronounced identically, although if you apply the incorrect tone, you become persona non grata. Now, if it's not our fish, it's our beef. Kobe and Wagyu beef are popping up on menus everywhere in America. But how did such a rare, expensive meat suddenly become so common and affordable? Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's probably not authentic. Kobe beef, the creme de la creme of Wagyu, comes from just a few thousand cows in Japan each year, all bred from 12 special bulls. Only a fraction of this beef reaches the US, and just 8 restaurants serve the real thing. As for Wagyu, less than 5,000 Wagyu cows in America are purebred. Most beef labeled as Wagyu is actually F1 grade, just 50% Wagyu. So the next time you see Kobe or Wagyu on a menu, take it with a grain of salt. Or a whole shaker for that matter. A theory has been circulating the internet recently about colored squares at the bottom of toothpaste tubes. The claim is that it's a grading scale, green meaning natural, all the way down to black, which is code for pure chemical. That's just flat out wrong. But that didn't stop the theory from getting so popular that Colgate posted a statement on their website. The company explained that these colored boxes are for light sensors to identify the end of the tube during packaging. It's not as exciting, but, it makes a hell of a lot more sense. That's right. When baby carriages first hit the scene 3 centuries ago, they were a status symbol among the aristocracy. Designed by landscape architect William Kent for the Duke of Devonshire, these early strollers were more like fancy carts drawn by ponies, dogs, or even goats. Before these luxurious carriages, babies were carried in everything from slings to baskets, a practice dating back to ancient Egypt. It wasn't until the 19th century that the stroller became more practical, thanks to Benjamin Potter Crandall, who introduced the design that could actually be pushed. Initially a luxury item, the stroller gained widespread popularity after Queen Victoria purchased a few, making it a must-have for mothers everywhere. How devastated would you be if your beloved cat passed away? Pretty devastated, I'm sure. But would you go so far as to shave off your own eyebrows? This tradition was observed back in ancient Egypt, where felines were regarded as having godlike status. The great writer Herodotus mentioned this bizarre tribute. It isn't entirely clear why this happened, but things got worse for dog owners. In that instance, all of your hair would need to be shaved off. Here at List 25, we don't judge. However, if edibles are your thing, you really need to find better ways to store them. With recreational marijuana becoming more popular and legal, edibles have skyrocketed in popularity, especially among people new to cannabis. The problem is that a lot of these edibles look like candy, and inconsistent regulations mean they're often packaged in ways that kids can easily mistake for snacks. This has led to a rise in children being hospitalized after accidentally eating marijuana edibles. In one case, a child died after eating Delta-8 THC edibles, and in another, a toddler barely survived after consuming Delta-9 edibles in Las Vegas. Safe storage matters. Have a quick look at your backpack, if there's one lying around. On the back of it, more than likely, there is a diamond patch. They come in different shapes and sizes, some more flashy than others. They all serve the same purpose though. These are called lash tabs, and they're designed to pass a string through to make it easier to carry extra gear. Lash tabs were originally used for outdoor backpacking, like hiking and camping. Now, new generations of urban backpacks feature them too, partly because there's a trendy retro look to the feature. The secret is bug poo. I kid you not. That shiny finish on your favorite sweets comes from shellac, made from the excretions of female lac beetles. These beetles live in the trees of India and Thailand, where they secrete shellac as a protective coating. The shellac is harvested, turned into dry flakes, and then dissolved in alcohol to create a liquid that's used for everything, from food glazes to wood finishes. So, I guess it is true that all that glitters is not gold. You may think if someone eats a lot and doesn't pile on the pounds, then they must have a fast metabolism. Wrong. They actually have a slow metabolism based on their BMR, or basal metabolic rate, otherwise known as the amount of calories a human needs to keep going. The skinnier you are, the lower the muscle mass, and the lower the muscle mass, the lower the BMR, hence a slow metabolism. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your ground beef might come with a little something extra. Poop. In 2015, Consumer Reports tested 300 packages of ground beef from 103 stores across the US and found fecal contamination in each and every one of them. So, I'm just going to pause for a moment. Is everybody okay? All right, let's move on. Because ground beef is, well, ground up, any bacteria gets spread throughout the entire package. If you don't cook it properly or handle it carefully, you risk spreading that bacteria to your kitchen or yourself. Now you might be wondering, how does poop even get in there? Well, processing cows is messy business, and feces from intestines or hides can make its way into the mix. So a bit of extra cooking time might be in order next time you're doing burgers. How do you eat your meat? Let me know in the comments below. Medium rare, hell yeah. Well done, I don't understand why you even bother. That's gonna cause some fun in the comments. Some coins have a little ridge pattern on the edges to stop fraud. It's a way of making what's called coin clipping more difficult. When coins had smooth edges, clippers would shave off a part of the coin to resell it. This was especially high during the days of the silver standard, and the ridged edge put a stop to it. With the end of the silver and gold standard, plus the rise of credit cards and smartphones, clipping really isn't a problem anymore. Have you ever wondered what buttermilk actually is? It's not some magic dairy potion. It's simply the leftover liquid after making butter. When you churn cream, the butterfat separates from the liquid. The resulting liquid, which we call buttermilk, is what's left behind. So every time you pour buttermilk into a recipe, you're basically using the liquid byproduct of butter making. Wind power is good for the planet. Well, most of it. One life form it isn't always so kind to are birds. Just as our avian friends collide with planes, they also run into wind turbines with horrible results. Stats show that in the UK alone, the annual death rate is anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 birds. Bad news for birds, good news for people who want to sit on the beach and actually enjoy their french fries. Nutmeg can be found in just about everything during the holidays, on top of your eggnog, spicing up your pumpkin pie, or baked into your favorite desserts. But this innocent-looking spice has a wild side. It can make you hallucinate. Nutmeg contains myristicin, a compound that in large amounts can cause panic, dry mouth, and several other unpleasant side effects. In fact, back in 12th century Europe, no one used nutmeg for pies. They used it as a drug. It's even rumored that Nostradamus used it to inspire his visions. There is a small discreet pocket woven into the front of women's underwear. The correct name for it is a gusset, and the purpose is to make everything more breathable down there. Usually composed of natural fibers, this little pocket is an extra layer that is important for maintaining hygiene. It gives less friction and helps to extend the lifespan of the underwear too. The white t-shirt might seem like the ultimate wardrobe staple, but its journey started with military practicality and a dash of literary flair. The basic t-shirt evolved from a need for simpler, more practical clothing during the early 20th century. In the post-Spanish-American War era, Cooper Underwear Company advertised the bachelor shirt as a no-fuss, pull-over-the-head design that didn't need buttons. It didn't take long for the US military to adopt the lightweight short-sleeve white cotton undervest for soldiers, especially in warmer climates, and civilians everywhere soon started to wear them too. The term t-shirt itself became popular only after F. Scott Fitzgerald coined the term in his book This Side of Paradise, thanks to its T-shaped silhouette. So when you rock a t-shirt, you're not just making a fashion choice, you're wearing a bit of American history. You have two types of fat in your body, and it's two different colors. The majority is white fat. This white stuff provides insulation for your insides, giving you that warm, flabby feeling. White fat also stores energy. Meanwhile, brown fat is similar, but it burns calories and helps regulate body temperature. Bonus fact, it's thought that if you sleep in cooler temperatures, you boost the amount of brown fat. And some believe having more of this calorie-burning fat in your system is beneficial. As always, consult a professional before doing anything dramatic with your weight. If you're eating a bowl of cereal right now, I am so sorry. A lot of cereals use a form of vitamin D derived from lanolin, the grease that can be found in sheep's wool. It's what helps sheep repel water, but for you, it means your cereal isn't vegetarian and definitely not vegan if you're pairing it with non-dairy milk. Lanolin is also a sneaky addition to other foods like baby formula, margarine, and fortified milk. Unfortunately for us, labels don't always specify whether the vitamin D comes from plants or animals, which means you could be eating animal-derived ingredients without even knowing it. Opening up an online delivery, it's not uncommon to find small white packets of silica. The packet usually instructs you to throw it away, but why are they there in the first place? Silica gel is made up of sand and other chemicals that are able to absorb moisture, which can be dangerous for many different products. If clothing or certain kinds of food gets wet and is kept in small packages for too long, it can do serious damage, like growing mold. Those tiny white packets ensure that your new delivery arrives new and fresh. Pom-poms aren't just cute things we put on winter hats. They have a very practical history too. Back in the day, pom-poms were a budget-friendly choice. They were made from leftover yarn, making them a clever way to add a touch of flair without breaking the bank. But there's more to the story. It's actually believed that sailors were the first to wear them. According to legend, sailors would always bump their heads on the old ship's low ceilings and during rough seas. So to prevent injuries, a round cushion was added to the tops of their hats. Some even say that the red pom-poms of the French Navy came from a sailor who hit his head so hard it bled. So that pom-pom on your hat actually started as a clever safety measure. Sneezes can be embarrassing. Nothing like startling a public area with an unexpected and explosive blast from the nostrils. However, sneezes are also necessary. And if you try to hold it back, you could put yourself in jeopardy. There's no point bunging up your airway for the sake of vanity. With nowhere to go, the sneeze could blast into your ears and pop your eardrums. It can even damage blood vessels in your brain. Well, a lot. The fuss over wood content in food started in 2012 when FDA agents paid a surprise visit to Castle Cheese Inc. in rural Pennsylvania. Instead of producing 100% Parmesan, the company was cutting corners, literally, by adding wood pulp. This cheese ended up on shelves in major grocery chains. The company's president, Michelle Murder, was fined, given probation, and sentenced to 200 hours of community service. For the record, wood pulp, also called cellulose, is a common safe additive used in everything from salad dressings to cereal. But Parmesan that's 10% sawdust? As a cheese lover, I have to say the fine should have been more. Solo cups have plenty more uses than just drinking at parties. There are normally 3 lines at different levels of the cup, and they're made for measuring. The first line is 1 ounce, the next is 5, and the final is 12 ounces. These are pretty common doses for different alcohols, whether it's liquor, wine, or beer. But the Solo Cup doesn't compare to what's coming up at number 6, which will show you how you've been using toothpicks wrong your entire life. When World War II was on the horizon in the late 30s, the British government prepared for heavy air raids. As part of the preparations, the Air Raid Precautions, or ARP, department gathered up metal railings from homes across London and melted them down to create around 600,000 steel stretchers. These weren't just any stretchers. They were tough, easy to clean, and perfect for the grim realities of wartime London. By the end of the war, London was a mess, and the London County Council faced the challenge of what to do with all those leftover stretchers. They got creative and repurposed them into the black railings we see around some South London housing estates today, in the process turning their wartime utility into a lasting piece of London's history. Finland is reportedly the happiest place on Earth, so it's actually a surprise to learn they also feature a record-breaking number of heavy metal bands. There are an ear-shattering 70 bands for every 100,000 people here. How did this happen? Turns out metal is just a good way for Finns to let out some heavy emotions. It isn't the most touchy-feely country in the world, despite its happy reputation, so sometimes they just gotta crank up the volume and fire up those instruments. This next entry might just ruin yogurt for you forever. In 2015, researcher Cecilia Westbrook took an unconventional approach to science. She made yogurt using bacteria from her own, nether regions. Using a wooden spoon to collect the sample, she left it overnight in a bowl of milk. The result? A tangy, sour yogurt that, and I quote, made her tongue tingle. While it sounds weird, her experiment did highlight an important research gap. There's plenty of focus on gut bacteria, but very little on the bacterial ecosystem in feminine parts. Her work has inspired other researchers who are now exploring its potential for probiotics and treatments for yeast infections. The blue and red colored erasers are more than just aesthetic. According to a Reddit thread, many people grew up thinking that one side was for pencils and the other side was for pens. But that's a complete myth. The blue part is actually designed for coarse paper, like on a sketch pad, while the red part is for precision erasing. Peeling sticky tape can actually create X-ray bursts strong enough to reveal the bones in your fingers. And you don't even have to expend a lot of energy. Peeling the tape at just 3 centimeters per second produces X-ray bursts with 15 kiloelectron-volt energy, packing over 1 million photons. It's possible because the tape's sticky side gets a positive charge while the roll takes on a negative charge. When electrons jump from the tape to the roll, they generate X-rays. While some dream of using this energy for X-ray photography or even nuclear fusion, the energy needed to peel the tape far exceeds what we could potentially gain from these X-rays, so don't expect it to power your home anytime soon. Some of the best things in life aren't planned. Trust me, we have an entire list or two on accidental inventions, so check that out. Take ice pops. Cold, refreshing, and completely accidental. We actually have ice pops, or popsicles, due to an 11-year-old boy from the San Francisco Bay Area named Frank Epperson. The year was 1905. Messing around, Frank decided to pour soda powder into some water. It was freezingly cold that night, and the beverage iced up. Frank took advantage of the accident, calling the result an epsicle. Popsicle is thought to have come from the popping sound the thing made when you took it out. You know that lovely, bready Subway smell? As it turns out, some of it might come from azodicarbonamide, a chemical better known for making plastic stretchy. This stuff shows up in everything, from bread and bagels to tortillas and pastries. So why is it in your food? ADA is used to bleach flour and improve the dough's texture. Oh, and fun fact, it's also found in yoga mats and shoes. Delicious, right? While ADA is legal in the US and Canada, it is banned in Australia and much of Europe. If you've seen the wavy side of a bobby pin sticking out of a girl's hair, then they're doing it wrong. There are 2 sides to a bobby pin, one straight and one wavy. The proper way to use them in hair is to put the wavy side down, which means facing the scalp. Many people have been doing it the other way for so long that they don't even know it's wrong, but the wavy side down provides grip. Same thing if you're using a yarmulke, my fellow Jews. Wavy side down. Or just the other clippy ones. Those are fun to play with though. Those are really fidgety. I prefer the big clippies rather than the bobby pins. One of the best parts about having a birthday is blowing out the birthday candles and making a wish, right? Okay, that and, eating cake. In ancient Greece, people placed candles on their cake to honor the goddess Artemis. They believed that blowing out the candles would send their wishes directly to the gods and keep the evil spirits at bay. As the tradition moved to other parts of the world, people added their own twist to it. For example, the Germans made everyone believe that if you made a secret wish while blowing out the candles, that wish could possibly come true. Over time, the tradition reached countries all around the world, and so became one of the best parts of birthday parties everywhere. Identical twins apparently aren't so identical. Fingerprints don't come out the same because basically Mother Nature can't handle everything. The development of fingerprints is subject to factors such as how a fetus is positioned, and these random details simply won't be consistent across two people. Desserts, soda, and grandma's cookies aren't the only places sugar is hiding. Many foods marketed as low-fat or light are loaded with sugar to make up for the flavor lost when fat is removed. Think yogurt, for example. Too soon? Sorry. Everyday staples like ketchup, barbecue sauce, jarred spaghetti sauces, and even canned soups are surprisingly high in sugar. Sports drinks, fruit juice, iced tea, and pre-made smoothies pack in even more. Even cereals, granola, and protein bars, foods often considered healthy, can be sugar bombs. Although, God, what I wouldn't have given for a bowl of chocolate frosted sugar bombs. If you know where that's from, let me know in the comments below. I'll be very impressed. Well, back to my trusty keyboard here. There are tiny ridges, I don't know if you can see this, right here, on the F and the J keys. The reason is that so you can position your hands correctly without needing to look. Since the invention of the typewriter, typists have had a resting position to work faster. The two slightly raised bumps serve as tactile markers for your two index fingers, and you might be using them without even noticing. Otherwise, you would find yourself glancing down at your keyboard pretty frequently just to make sure your fingers are on the correct keys. Chocolate milk might be the ultimate comfort drink today, but it wasn't always a sweet treat. Believe it or not, it started out as medicine. An Irishman, Sir Hans Sloane, traveled to Jamaica in the 17th century. While there, the locals introduced him to cocoa, but he found it downright nauseous. Determined to make it drinkable, Sloane mixed the cocoa with milk, creating a much more palatable beverage. When he returned to England, he brought the recipe with him, where it was served as medicine for years. It only became the sweet milky treat we know and love today in 1875, when Swiss entrepreneur Daniel Peter created a dehydrated version. And the rest, as they say, is history. Stores keep their fruit cold to lock in freshness. How long do they put it in cold storage? A long time. Believe it or not, the apples you buy at the supermarket could have been there for as much as a year. The least amount of time is 6 months. They're reportedly kept at an optimum temperature of between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius, so if your apple tastes a little dry, that's probably the reason. Surprise! Pringles aren't technically potato chips. Unlike regular chips, which are thin slices of fried potato, Pringles are actually made from a mix of dehydrated potato, rice, corn, and wheat. Yum! I do love Pringles. The FDA weighed in back in 1975, ruling that Pringles couldn't be called chips unless they added a disclaimer saying they were made from dried potatoes. Rather than complicate things, Pringles simply rebranded them as crisps, and that's what we've been eating ever since. What's your favorite Pringles flavor? Let me know in the comments below. Honey mustard. So good. So good. A toothpick might seem like a straightforward tool. I'll be right back. However, some of them have an extra hidden function. Grooved toothpicks, which again you probably can't see from here, but trust me, it's there, look much more decorative than the rest. The real purpose of the intended end is to be broken off after use. Then you can rest the used toothpick on top of it so that it doesn't touch the table. They're sometimes called Japanese toothpicks and are more often found in Asian restaurants. The first vending machines were all about holiness. Back in the 1st century CE, a Greek engineer named Heron of Alexandria came up with the world's first vending machine, but instead of chips or candy, it dispensed holy water. The concept was surprisingly similar to what we have today. You drop a coin in the slot and voila! The weight of the coin would trigger a lever, releasing just enough holy water for your needs. It wasn't until centuries later that Heron's invention gained traction, first with tobacco, followed by stamps, and later, Tutti Frutti chewing gum. What's your favorite thing to grab out of a vending machine? Let me know in the comments below. In 2008, plain old George Garrett had his name changed to Captain Fantastic, Fast Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, Hulk, and the Flash combined. The British teenager is technically just Captain Fantastic, with the rest of his name consisting of a boast. Either way, it's actually inspirational and pretty wild stuff. I might even alter my personal details. You know what? From now on, I am Mike, the fact finder who facts faster than a fact checker on a fact-finding mission sitting on a fast-moving fact train to Fact Town. Although you could just call me M-Fact. That's a terrible rap name. Just stick with my tummy's rumbling. I know what you're thinking. I know, stop. Meat glue? Hey, I'm just presenting facts here. Known as transglutaminase, this enzyme is used to bind smaller pieces of meat together to create uniform, appetizing cuts. It's made using bacteria from cow blood plasma. Yeah, you heard that right. And while it's been banned in the EU since 2010, it's still commonly used in the US. I am noticing a theme here. The FDA likes to call it generally recognized as safe, but glued meat comes with higher risks. There's a greater chance of bacteria growing on the separate pieces, and it's harder to cook them thoroughly. I don't know, maybe sawdust isn't all that bad. Toblerone's unique shape is just as famous as the nougat, almond, and chocolate mix that make the candy so popular. The chocolate is really just one large connected piece. It's shaped into a row of triangles connected by a ridge that allows for each shape to be broken off separately. But most people break the triangles off the wrong way. Instead of pulling outwards, which can take a considerable amount of strength, it's much easier to push them inwards. In fact, all it takes is a small tap. Also, they're supposed to represent the mountains. Back in the day, comfort was a bit harder to come by. Literally. The ancient Egyptians were the first to use pillows, but they weren't the plush, fluffy ones we know today. Instead, these early pillows were made from wood, ivory, or even stone. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with your head resting on that. The Egyptians' pillows were more like decorative headrests, purely designed to keep their heads off the ground and away from any bugs. Wasabi paste is guaranteed to make your eyes and nose run. The thing is, it shouldn't. What you think of as wasabi paste is in fact bulked out with horseradish. That stuff is cheaper, giving you a kick in the taste buds for a low price. Furthermore, genuine wasabi isn't mustardy and has a much more subtle flavor than you think. In 2017, a 5-year-old boy choked to death at an after-school club when a grape became lodged in his airway. Paramedics tried to remove it, but it was too late. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon. From 1999 to 2013, grapes were the third most common cause of childhood choking deaths in the US, after hot dogs and boiled sweets. Their smooth, spherical shape and soft texture make them especially dangerous, since they can get stuck in the airway and are hard to dislodge with the Heimlich maneuver. Pre-slicing grapes can help, but even that's not foolproof. Those flaps on the side of juice boxes can remind us of childhood. Is there really a purpose to them, though? Actually, yes. One of the big reasons is to help kids. After the flaps are popped out, they form two outstretched wings for the little hands to grab onto. This is a big help for parents too, because it can stop children from accidentally squeezing the box and shooting juice all over the place. The speculum, a common tool in gynecology today, has a deeply troubling history. It all started in the mid-1800s in the American South, when a surgeon by the name of James Marion Sims began conducting experimental surgeries. But here's the horrific part. His subjects were mostly enslaved women, and these procedures were usually performed without anesthesia. Sims' goal was to treat vesicovaginal fistulas and gain a deeper understanding of the female reproductive system, but his methods were as cruel as they were pioneering. Pet allergies are a nightmare, but occasionally the trouble goes the other way. Dander is the name given to the multitude of dead skin cells that constantly fall from our bodies, and sadly for some animals, they're allergic to it. It's as irritating to them as pet hair can be to some of us. I'm not allergic to you and you're not allergic to me, right, buddy? Say hi. This is Pika, or Picasso. Okay, go do other things. I love you. Bye, buddy. In 2011, a listeria outbreak linked to cantaloupes from Jensen Farms in Colorado became the deadliest foodborne illness outbreak in the US since 1998. The outbreak was linked to unsanitary conditions in the farm's packing facility, which allowed the bacteria to spread, leading to 33 deaths and 147 confirmed illnesses across 28 states. In 2018, listeria-contaminated rock melons also caused 4 deaths in New South Wales, prompting a recall. And should you be pregnant, rather skip the melon completely. Pregnancy increases your risk of contracting listeria tenfold. Does your toothbrush have a few blue bristles? Or did it used to? It turns out it's a pretty important difference. The blue color is actually added so that you know when it's time to change toothbrushes. If these bristles begin to fade, or they're fraying or decaying, then you need a new toothbrush. Changing toothbrushes can get rid of up to 30% more plaque, so don't forget. Stick-on moles might seem pretty strange today, but in the 18th century, they were actually quite the fashion statement. Back then, a beauty mark wasn't something you'd want to get rid of. It was a symbol of elegance and flair. People didn't just show off the moles they had, they went a step further and bought stick-on versions made from silk, velvet, and even mouse skin to elevate their style. These beauty patches were carefully placed on the face to highlight features or set a certain vibe. It's a far cry from what we consider stylish now, but hey, trends change, right? Maybe it'll come back. Hashtag bring back stick-on moles. Firstly, Pez seems to be an American thing, but it actually comes from Vienna, where it was invented by business person Edward Haas III in the early 20th century. Pez is a shortened version of Pfefferminz, the German word for peppermint, and Haas intended it as a helpful snack for smokers. The fun, image, and novelty dispensers came later. If we've learned anything today, apart from the fact that people are making body yogurt, it's that the FDA is seriously dodgy. For instance, apart from maggots, cigarette butts, and so on, the FDA doesn't allow whole insects in food, but insect parts? No problem. According to their guidelines, small fragments like heads and legs are surprisingly common, especially in spices. Cinnamon can legally contain up to 400 insect fragments per 50 grams. Ground marjoram, up to 1,175 per 10 grams. Crushed oregano allows 300 per 10 grams, but switch to ground oregano and you're looking at 1,250 fragments per 10 grams. It's gross, but it does make you wonder, are the pieces just smaller and more plentiful because the oregano is ground finer? Tic Tacs are a blast of freshness in your mouth. Shaking the mints around in their little box, it can be difficult to judge how many you need. It turns out, on the underside of the lid, there's a little groove to retrieve one at a time. Just turn the container upside down, making sure that one is sitting on the lid, and then slowly open, turning the rest of the container and keeping the lid still. Back in the Victorian era, love seats weren't actually made for cozying up with your partner. They were designed for something far less romantic, fitting women's dresses. Yep, these seats were built to accommodate those massive billowing gowns that were all the rage back then. With hoops, petticoats, and layers galore, a woman needed space to sit down and smooth out her dress without getting it all bunched up. So, love seats weren't born as some romantic spot for couples, but as a practical solution for fashion. The third nipple, or polythelia, is associated with the likes of Chandler Bing and Bond villain Scaramanga. This genetic mutation is attention-grabbing, but it's rare, right? Actually, the ratio of people with 3 nipples compared to the standard 2 is probably higher than you think. A staggering 1 in 18 people have one. So the next time you're at the movies or supermarket or even in line for the bus, look at the people around you. Somewhere out there, a third nipple is just sitting there undetected. If you're craving silly putty, I've got good news. You could probably grab some along with your fries. The bad news? You probably shouldn't eat it. Dimethylpolysiloxane, PDMS, is a silicone compound that's commonly used as an anti-foaming agent in fast foods. It's the same ingredient that gives silly putty its stretchy, gooey texture. Great for kids, not so much for your digestive system. PDMS also pops up in caulks, adhesives, aquarium sealants, polishes, and silicone-based lubricants. Scrumptious, right? Approved by the FDA in 1998, PDMS quickly made its way into menu items like McDonald's chicken nuggets, Chick-fil-A sandwiches, Taco Bell cinnamon twists, and Five Guy fries. And if fast food isn't your thing, don't worry, you can also find it in cooking oils, vinegar, chewing gum, and even chocolate. You might have purchased clothes and been surprised to receive an extra piece of fabric. It's not for sewing, as most people usually believe. Instead, it's a test piece for when you're using new washing detergent, bleach, or any other cleaning product. Put the fabric in, and you'll know whether or not it's safe to put the entire piece of clothing in.